And just like that, we are back with chapter 42 of the universe. According to Mugsy, I am Mugsy, the creator. Today is 8/8/8, August 8th, 2024. And we are talking current events, culture, and consciousness. And a lot has happened since we last checked in. And I thought today would be a good day to really dissect some of it and put it into our little paradigm of dissection under the lenses of our current events, our culture, and our consciousness. And we're better to start than the United States presidential election. This whole podcast started because I believe that I understood reality better than anybody else I had encountered in real life. And as we talk about, we predicted the entire election cycle from the Republican side, a little bit different on the Democratic side, but we were right there in the whole thing until we got to this point here now, which is why we require to look at it under a microscope and really see what is going on in the political current events section and what that says about our broader culture. And to start off the conversation, I was reading a transcript of an Edward Snowden discussion. Now, for those of you who don't know Edward Snowden is an enemy to the United States of America, American government. He was a whistleblower as a defense contractor who worked with releasing information with Glenn Greenwald that revealed to the American people that the United States was surveilling them, even though after the Patriot Act, it said that it was no longer doing so. So however you feel about Edward Snowden, whether you see him as a political or, political enemy, or a political ally to the United States, that doesn't really matter for this discussion. What really Snowden has a brilliant job of doing is being able to cut to the crux of the argument almost immediately. And the question that was posed to him that I thought we could start the conversation off with was this election cycle, and does it feel normal? That is a weird question because nothing feels normal in the United States of America anymore. Everything feels sped up. Everything feels divisive. But looking at this presidential election cycle, how could we call it anything at all in the realm of normal? Kamala Harris does not have a presidential ballot cast for her yet to this point in the election. And she is the candidate for the Democratic Party. She has not come out to speak yet, 17 or 18 days into her being announced as the candidate, right? Or potentially being the candidate. What else feels weird about this election? What are Kamala Harris's positions? I went on to her website. I think it's kamalaharris.com, but you can Google it. And she still does not have any of her positions on there. She's running for president of the United States in one of the major political parties. And she has not answered one question about her positions on anything. On anything. That is abnormal, to say the least, about any political process, even though we talk about politics in the realm of theater, as it very well is. It is as if the director or the writer stopped writing lines and everyone's improvising. Kamala Harris announced her vice president candidate, which we'll get into, but it seems like all she has is a look. And that is, I guess, what we are going to use to crush inflation and prevent war, because she hasn't used her mouth to verbalize any changes that are coming because of her election to the executive branch of the United States government. And that used to be a very important part of the election cycle. So, yeah, It doesn't feel normal at the moment. Anybody saying it does must have something wrong with them. What else is weird? What does Biden think about all this? What does the President of the United States today, August 8th, 2024, think of Kamala's candidacy, Kamala's presidency, Kamala's positions, how they differ from his own positions, why they may have been at odds? Do they agree on every single thing? Why is he not coming out and stating that as President of the United States? Well, I think we know that's because he is not all mentally there, which has been revealed to us in new leaks that have come out of the Biden campaign, that his staffers have been countering the original misinformation, which was acknowledging Biden's reduced mental capacity and calling it out for what it was. The Biden campaign staffers were actually instructed to counter this information with their own misinformation and pointing to how actually he was mentally all there. In fact, to the best he had ever been all there. Now, this revelation is quite interesting because how far back do the lies go? When was Joe Biden mentally fit to push a broom or a mop or wipe his ass or not fall off a bike? At what point was it in 2020? Was it in 2016? We have seen members of Congress be wheeled around to votes and have people whisper in their ear what they were supposed to vote when they vote incorrectly. This is nothing new. The Republican Senator Mitch McConnell has froze time and time again, where apparently he is suffering from a stroke while in the middle of a speech. The reduced capacity of our political electorate has been obvious for some time. Now, as Kamala Harris must have known, how much has she been brushing under the rug? How much has she been in control of the decision-making process? What else has not been normal about this election cycle? The policies, her website we talked about, what does she actually think? She hasn't come out and made a speech. She has gone on stage a couple of times, not to answer questions or talk in any way about the policies that she would like to create. She is and was the worst possible candidate that the Democrats could come up with, not but 2 weeks ago. It is very important to realize that 2 weeks ago, 1 month ago, Kamala Harris had the least support of any vice president in history. The gambling markets had her as the lowest rank odds to become the Democratic candidate for president. The entire world has shifted seemingly at a moment's notice. That is not normal. None of that is normal. Why are we being asked to eat up this candidacy when it is never really explained to us, and we are only to jump to the conclusion that Kamala is seemingly a female or Black or Indian representation of this amorphic blob that we are calling the Democratic side of the political 50-50 division, the blob of the deep state. There is nothing to her. There is nothing of substance. And perhaps that's why they believe she will be a candidate that will be successful. But even talking about her success as a realm of possibility today on August 8th is something inconceivable a month ago. The world has come a long way in a short time. We cannot accept this. This is the moment to say, no, thanks, but no thanks. Definitely not. And perhaps her vice candidate pick is what should be giving us the pause that maybe a lot of us are feeling, and I am certainly recognizing in a lot of the commentary on the internet and on podcast political discourse. And before we get to the VP, the assassination of Donald Trump, there has still been no resolution to that. A former president of the United States has been allegedly attempted to be assassinated, and there is no resolution. And we skipped over that completely. Now acknowledging President Biden's reduced mental capacity, are we going to re-examine the political persecution the judicial system has been exerting on someone running for a candidate for president of the United States of America? Now, looking at this in the rearview mirror, recognizing and utilizing what we now know today to be true and fact, it should reveal a little more of what's going on behind the scenes. Because again, you can't on one hand say if Donald Trump wins the presidency, then all will be lost because one person holding the reins is detrimental to democracy. And at the same time say, don't worry about the fact that we just switched out Kamala Harris for a guy that hasn't been there mentally for years, and we've been lying to you about that. Don't acknowledge that. Don't see that for what it is. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. Now let's get to the vice presidency. Let's get to this governor of Minnesota, Walz, who Kamala picked. And it's as if with each accusation is an admission of guilt from the Democratic Party all the time. And I'm not saying the Republican Party isn't guilty of the same things, but we are at such a unique moment politically in this country. And if you are not recognizing it, you don't have your finger on the pulse of everything that's going on. That's all I'm trying to explain to you. Because this governor who would take over for president if Kamala is removed, right? God forbid she fucking wins, is somebody that oversaw a state in full chaos during the George Floyd riots, during the Black Lives Matter movement. This is a governor who is fully down with burning down his own cities, his own small businesses, and calling it racial equality and equity, as opposed to what it is, a riot of criminals who are breaking the law, defunding the police in some way to make a racial statement. That makes no sense logically. We all lived through it. And we all lived through quote unquote MAGA riots and what those look like. And we lived through Black Lives Matter protests, which seem to have characterized what a riot would look like in our current understanding. And we brush those off as if they never happened. Countless businesses destroyed. How much money stolen? Who were the primary funders of the Black Lives Matter movements? Those were corporations dumping money onto racial problems to help further incite division on a cultural level. That is who Kamala Harris picked to be her vice president. Every accusation is an admission. And at what point in this political cycle are we going to start looking at this as a possibility of our future? What is to make us believe that a peaceful transition of power is again in our future if someone other than the current administration is elected to the executive branch? Why would they give up power? If Joe Biden has been at a diminished capacity for a year, that would make this political cycle make a whole lot more sense. That would make the weaponization of the judicial system make a whole lot more sense. That would make the alleged attempted assassination of a former president make a whole lot more sense. And if we were to start predicting the future, that would make the current administration refusing to give up power make a whole lot more sense. And until we recognize that as a possibility of a timeline that could exist in the near future, unless we do something about it today, then there is a possibility that we may end up on that timeline. And that is inconceivable today, certainly inconceivable a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. Yet here we are, 888, having this conversation. And it's just not normal. To answer your question, to answer the question that was asked of Mr. Snowden, I haven't been around for a long time watching these elections, but this one does not feel normal. To me, when I was a child, we used to look up to the position of presidency as someone who was a leader, who had ethics and integrity, moral character. And when they spoke, people listened. They were trying to unite all of the different religions, colors, sexes, sexual orientations under one flag, the United States of America, what we were supposed to represent to the world during the time of Olympics. That was what the United States president used to represent to me when I was a child. And each election season, we would comb through the resume of the candidates and listen to them speak on how they had a vision of how they saw the future of this country coming together as the best version of itself. Somewhere along the line between my childhood and the present day, it became very obvious to me that no matter who we elect, the policies don't change. And it was revealed to me that politics are theater. So the reverence and respect that I used to have for the office of the presidency, I no longer have. And that has been pervasive, I believe, among many age demographics in the United States of America. And that has led to this shift in this culture and the way that we see everything. And the reason that it's important that we have an understanding of who's at the reins of this country is because we need to hold them accountable. There are many things happening in this country right now that we should pay attention to. How about our military troops being moved into the Mediterranean Sea to be closer to the Middle East because of rising conflicts in that region? There's also, I don't know, maybe you guys heard of this little Russia-Ukraine conflict that's been going on. Our funds are being dumped into it. How does the president of the United States feel about this? Who is making the decisions? Who is making the decisions to move our military all around the globe? Who is making the decisions to structure our economy in a way that makes the most sense for the most people, right? Who has their hand? Who can we hold accountable when this inevitably goes wrong? There used to be somebody sitting in a position that used to be called the bully pulpit, and they could exert pressure on different aspects of our culture to try and ignite people to move in the same directions, perhaps businesses. But again, this is not normal. Inflation has been crushing the American citizen, and that's a perfect transition. Talk a little bit about the economy. I think that's everything we had to talk about with Kamala. And the VP pick, the George Floyd, BLM, burning down the country. Every accusation is a confession. Does the presidency really even matter anymore? We touched on that. What is it? What has it become? Is it a groupthink like it once was under LBJ? Was it always a groupthink? And this idea of a president as one person, this executive branch being one thing, has always really been a figment of our imagination. Is it some amalgamation of the two? Do we need a commander-in-chief anymore? These are all interesting conversation topics, maybe things that we should be discussing at this point in space-time as this election cycle is going on. Our border, it being open. How have the controls on elections improved since 2020? If there were indeed flaws in the election cycle, how many people, legally and illegally, will be voting in this election cycle? All questions I would love to hear from the President of the United States or any candidate running for President of the United States. But the economy is, inflation, is a war on the poor. Always has been, always will be. And this idea of capitalism is playing out exactly as capitalism should. We are in a point in this economy, in this economic cycle. I say cycle because it's all cyclical. Ups and downs in this economic environment, wild swings in volatility are normal. Quite the opposite of what we were just talking about in the political cycle, in this election cycle. The swings in economics are exactly what they should be. Because money isn't real. All of it is controlled on high by people that believe they know better than you. Now, if you pay attention, this is very evident to you because in this construct of capitalism, we have capital allocators. Those are people who take money and they allocate it in whatever way they see to return as much of it as possible back to themselves. You will be familiar with some of the names that I will ramble off here. Warren Buffett, one of the best capital allocators to ever live. Jeff Bezos, one of the best capital allocators to ever live. Sergey and the Brins for Google, Cisco, any one of these Fortune 500 companies, Jamie Dimon, these are the most effective capital allocators in our society because they are able to take a little bit of money and turn it into a lot of money. The only way they are able to do that is by pouring it onto the cracks in capitalism that will return the most reward for them. But because we do live in a capitalist system, what these men understand is you must manipulate the market. And that's exactly what they do, is take advantage of the structure of capitalism and the controls that capitalism bring. Because the United States of America, its citizens, haven't seen a raise since 81. Some go back to 78. That all depends on how you calculate inflation. But what coincides with this inflation, as well as the erosion of the United States dollar by moving off of the gold standard, is the decentralization of our industries by allowing more loopholes, by allowing corporations to buy each other and grow and grow. We have a mechanism in our society that allows corporations to exert their free speech. That is lobbying. They can exert their free speech through lobbyists who they pay to convince politicians to institute policies that work best for their industries. This is largely called a cycle of decentralization, and it has been going on since the early 80s. It has not stopped in any way, shape, or form, potentially, maybe, to a recent Google Supreme Court decision. We'll get into that. Capitalism, these cycles, are easy to identify because the people that have the most, Bill Gates, another one, capital allocator who I forgot to mention, will continually do good no matter whether the cycle's at the top or the bottom. Now, the only way for them to preserve their wealth and then double down on that wealth, grow it at an exponential rate, is by being able to predict the cycles of the market. The exact thing that Warren Buffett once said that he could not do. I love Warren Buffett. He is a beautiful soul. I do not know that that means he's acted ethically in this lifetime. However, his insights and understanding of compound interest, which he applied to money, are fascinating. He bought businesses. He became a mutual fund. Not Fidelity, Magellan. Oh, what is the name of Warren Buffett's, the Oracle of Omaha? Berkshire Hathaway, which was originally a furniture company. Now, this was a very successful furniture company that he purchased. It did so well that he used that company as a shell corporation to continue to buy other companies under that name. Now, that was a very profitable business throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s into the early 2000s. However, eventually, the monopolization of America, Warren Buffett being a chief example of the capitalism that he says prevents monopolies, he is himself an example of it, bought up all the corporations that were profitable. He bought all he could. All that was left was monopolies. So not being able to dump the funds that he has continually grown exponentially over time into new private businesses, he had to get into the stock market and get into the public game because now there were no companies left to buy. Quite frankly, the only things on the market were too big for him. So now he had to purchase positions in these companies. That is how Warren Buffett got into the stock market game. Now, the stock market game is a little different than the value growth business that Warren Buffett was in before. The stock market game has a lot to do with timing. And because of the erosion of there's a lot that goes into this. How do I summarize this aptly for my audience? Take a look at Berkshire Hathaway's stock sales in July. It was $300 billion. That will coincide with the height of the market. As we just saw last week, the market took a massive hit on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, somewhere around 5%. That should have triggered market shutdowns. I'm sure it did on different exchanges. Circuit breakers are what they're called in finance. And these are large, volatile moves that are scary. And it can be the foreshadowing of what we've known, that this economy, although it is doing horribly, in many ways has been propped up and inflated in many ways. The best capital allocators in this country, in the world, recognized that and took advantage of the inflated prices of their assets during the past 6 months. They have to release or disclose their sales on a lagging basis. So they don't have to tell you how much stock they sold right away. That is how they were able to time the market so brilliantly. Now, if you are of the position that they all just got lucky and you have embraced the fact that there is a randomness to this world, then there's not much that I can do for you. That is a view of evolution that Darwin hijacked many, many decades ago. Evolution is an internal process of going inside and peeling back the layers and understanding better yourself for your own reasons that make sense to yourself. And I think when we think about it in that context, it's a lot easier to see. Now, you can only lie to yourself for so long. And most people suffering under stagflation, which Jamie Dimon the CEO of the largest bank in the United States of America, the United States government's preferred bank, JP Morgan, came out and said that we are now suffering from stagflation, which you will remember that we talked about on this podcast months ago, because these are lagging indicators. I tell you the truth in real time. I let the economists do the math after the fact, which is another thing we're going to talk about with these numbers. What's the best way to discuss it? Coming out and admitting what the American people have known for the last 4 years now should be a slap in the face to the American public. The fact that nothing has been done about this crisis that has been a war on the country is a travesty of our own making. And until we recognize it as such, we are doomed to continue it, because the game Monopoly was a socialist creation to highlight the failings of capitalism, its inevitable failure. Now, that point was lost on the American people, as Michael Malice so aptly characterized and summarized on a podcast I was listening to with Kurt Mesker this week. And it is just the perfect example of how we can, even in the middle of it, not get the point of what's going on. And as these systems erode with this stock market crash, it is an opportunity to not build back in the same way and on the same foundation of sand that we once built our economic model. I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, right? We're going to start talking a little bit about predictions for the financial markets. I do not know. I could not conceive their ability to prop this economy up as long as they have. That has been evident in the acceptance of numbers. Energy numbers were just released, and energy number revisions were just released by this administration, and they were wildly off. It is one thing for our GDP numbers to be fudged. It is another thing for employment numbers to be fudged and revised. Things that may be chalked up to human error or lack of understanding or processes that are not perfected. But when energy numbers and consumption numbers cannot be accurately reported, we have lost all faith and trust in the system, which only further highlights that this stock market is way more Las Vegas than value investing, as Warren Buffett would have liked to characterize it. So I think that we are sitting on a moment here economically that we're going to remember for a long time. The almost 93% accurate predictor of a depression, which I believe we already were in, are when interest rates are inverted. The long-term and short-term yields no longer work towards market efficiencies. They have just reverted, which 93% of the time, I believe, indicates a depression. But having realized that we were already in a depression, I don't know what is lower than that. And that's the crux of it. We need to come up with new patterns. We need to come up with a new structure, and that would mean the destruction of the current patterns and paradigms that we're living under. And that will not be an enjoyable moment for anyone involved in it. I do not wish it upon us or our worst enemies. But it seems like inevitably it's knocking at our door. And oh my God, that was a lot. Kamala and the economy are a lot. And it is our consciousness that will get us through this. I am confident of that. I just it is such a blessing to be able to go back to the restaurant industry. I am now, because my relationship with my audience is so fucked up. I hate you guys so much because I haven't found a way to communicate with you. I haven't found a way to provide for myself in this space time by reaching a wide enough array of people. And perhaps that is my own fault, but we are working on it. And until that point, I'm going back to my roots, baby. I'm going back to the restaurant industry, and come on and see me at not Murphy's, at the Village Tavern in Salem. Through October, I am so excited to be back waiting tables. And it's just the restaurant industry. If you haven't worked inside of it, it's this crazy, dysfunctional amalgamation of consciously unconscious consciousness, people that are so awake and aware and comfortable with themselves and fighting it all at the same time. It is somewhere that you dream of being yourself and also nowhere all at the same time, and living inside of it or going out to eat and existing inside of it. It's just such this wild experience that we all used to be so fully engulfed in all the time. It wasn't until technology where people really spent time alone on the computer, on their phones, with themselves, where we became disconnected as a society. And now going out into these restaurants, into these environments out to eat, you feel the energy that once used to be so pervasive in all places walking outside of your house. It was this energy of connectedness that I don't think exists in the same way that it once did. Perhaps for a reason, but when I say being inside of the restaurant industry is somewhere and nowhere all at the same time, most restaurants fail. That's the truth of it. So when you're inside a successful one, you are living inside of a moment of a successful small business that is so rare in today's day and age. There are so few successful small businesses. And if they are a success, it's usually small independent contractor type stuff, people that are able to provide for themselves because of their self-sufficient knowledge and able to convey their value in the world in a way that's relatable. But I think that has become more rare in society today. So having a small business owner or a restaurant owner have success is being inside of this kind of place that is the American dream where everyone wants to be, or so they say. And at the same time, it's filled with people that have no desire to be working in this industry any longer than they have to be. It's people trying to put food on the table and trying to get to their next thing. Delivering food and making drinks is somebody's finish line, right? And you know these people in the industry. You'll have experiences with these bartenders and these waiters. They love what they're doing. Those people are great. That is somewhere for them. But you'll also see a ton of these people are college students or part-time gig workers, or they're doing this until they find the next thing or until their thing that is their thing takes off. And those people are fascinating because they have such a awareness of themselves and who they are as they're on this journey where they're kind of letting the wind blow them from restaurant to restaurant, from table to table, from experience to experience, from paycheck to paycheck, which is a crazy hard way to live. It's a hard way to live if you are so enveloped that you have control over this life. But for others, that control is exactly what destroys them. So being conscious and unconscious at the same time is following this intuition where you may not have the whole plan figured out. You may not even know that you're awake to following your intuition, but nonetheless, you are not accepting the path that was laid out for you, the path that society and culture has created for you, whoever you are, whatever that was, to sell drugs or go to college and become a doctor or be a plumber or a firefighter or an electrician. By not accepting that and accepting the day-to-day, the week-to-week paycheck that give you the ability to follow that intuition, you are unconsciously conscious. And hopefully, eventually, you get to that consciousness, which is this great awakening that I think we are all having. And I notice it because of the synchronicities. Synchronicities that I'm seeing everywhere. And there's synchronicities that only I would notice, right? They're there for me. It's just a little wink and a nod from the universe saying, hey, we are in this together because it's tough. It's so tough. And until I got back into the restaurant industry, I hadn't realized how removed I have become from all of the things and patterns that everyday people are existing in. I once inside the restaurant after a week or two, I start to realize, oh, wow, this podcast, this past year of starting this has been an incredible journey. And I need to meet everybody where they are, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to, because no matter where you're at, other people may not be ready to meet you. And this is it was a funny experience. And perhaps I do I am a little bit responsible for not understanding my environment when speaking freely or having the confidence to exert who I really am at all times. Maybe I should be a little more understanding of the environments and spaces that I'm in. But, anytime I'm cut down with kind of the same comments that I've been hit with time and time again over the past couple decades, whether it's sexism, whether it's homophobia, or whether it's racism, I just laugh because, uh, okay, we're going to do this again. Like, I feel like we're stuck in this pattern. We really can't get out of it. And I understand that maybe I have been able to transcend some of this stuff, but I have to understand that maybe everybody isn't. In the same spot that I am, because I made a comment about watermelon, and quite honestly, I wish I could remember the comment so that I could give you a fair and honest representation of the kind of experience that I'm going to discuss. But it was something to the Black community saying, oh, thank God for watermelon. The Black community had it right. And I offended somebody. I'm not sure their race. I don't know if they're Black, white, fucking any of the other things that you could be. But they said that's racist, and it was in a, like we always talk about energy, frequency, and vibration, the energy, the frequency, the tone, the nonverbal communication was, I clearly hit a chord and I hit something in there, a nerve. So the retort back was one of, cutting people down. That's a racist comment. I must be ignorant. I must be ignorant and unaware of how unaccepting I am being. Now, potentially I was. Maybe I was. Maybe that was a joke in poor taste. Maybe. But I noticed the synchronicities because after that experience, The other person walked out of the room, and several people came through that same room where the watermelon I was slicing up and fucking enjoying and appreciating so much in that moment on that hot day. In fact, I went so far out of my way to go get that watermelon, which was why I was enjoying it so much at that time. But several people of the Caucasian persuasion came through that kitchen, and not one made a comment about about that watermelon until a large African American gentleman came through that kitchen, and motherfucker, the first thing he said was, "Oh, watermelon!" And the excitement on his face was so great. It was just this little wink and the nod from the universe saying, "Hey, maybe you were being racist, but all of these stereotypes are grounded in some sort of reality that is the culture that we have created in our own consciousness. I don't know where that comes from. All I do is notice it and comment on it. That is part of the joy of living in this three-dimensional experience of space-time. So I am choosing to believe that was the universe, just with a little wink and a nod at me. And I think the rest of my night confirmed it. But this at the same party, I got to have such an amazing conversation with this great older woman who was trying to open up spiritually, I believe, and going from that one experience to the polar opposite, almost in back-to-back moments, was so amazing and fascinating. And it really confirmed for me that there is an underlying awakening, whether you want to call it a spiritual awakening or not, happening, and it is pervasive across, I will say, time and space. I will say geographic borders. And for whatever moment, it is available to people who want to tap into it now. I don't know if you're always able to tap into it this easily. But the conversation was with somebody who had experienced conversations with people who had passed on, people they knew and people they didn't know, entities, spirits, be them angels or demonic in nature, and the ability to open or close oneself off to it. Your consciousness is an ability to survive in this matrix of space-time. And as people grapple with that realization, slowly your ability to perceive will open up. And because we have control over our own reality, we can open our mind, ourself, our brain, and our heart up to these experiences, or we can choose consciously to say that these experiences are not possible, and we can close ourselves off to them. So I like to leave that with people, because there certainly are people willing to open themselves up to exploring this. And it's as simple as a conversation with yourself in a moment that you are alone, in a safe space where you can potentially go out there and start trying this crazy stuff, trying to have a conversation. Or potentially there are people out there that I've had conversations with this week as well that have had experiences that they are not ready for. Whether that's mentally, whether that's physically, whether that's emotionally, they are not ready to process whatever this experience is, whether it's a creation of their own brain, of their own consciousness, whether it is extra dimensional, extraterrestrial, extra spiritual. We don't know. But if you choose to close yourself up to it, I can guarantee you, you'll never have experiences like that again. So wherever you are at on your journey, be there. If you have questions, reach out. Like, subscribe, follow, do the things that the other people tell you to do. I don't know what that is, but the faster we get this broadcast out into the universe, the quicker the interesting conversations will come to us, and we will start to answer more of these questions for ourselves, in our own mind, in our own time, through the conversations and the experiences that other people have had that are willing to open up and be honest, at least their perception of honest with us about them and where they're at in their journey. So, it was a lot. That was a big episode. We had to cover a lot. A lot has happened. So the schedule's getting weird. I want to try doing lives too. I think that's going to be the plan heading toward October. I would love to take this podcast out on the streets and go live on whether it's Instagram, Twitter Spaces, Rumble. I am open to any of those platforms. Um, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, and Rumble, putting the podcast up there, trying to get some clips out to you guys and keep the conversation going. I love you guys. I will check in soon enough. Take back your consciousness. I love you. I'm out.